Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and Moon Knight, issue number 188. This is a Marvel Legacy renumbering. There have probably been about as many Moon Knight renumberings or, back to issue number ones as there have been for Captain America. And the character is not nearly as old as Captain America. So that says a lot about all the trials and errors and the false launches and everything that Moon Knight has started before. And it's funny because Max Bemis, the writer here, and Jason Burrows, the artist, they both talk about how Warren Ellis's run is really the turning point, the crux of the rejuvenation of Moon Knight. That was back in 2014. And that's interesting. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. And I like the idea. I love the idea that that's the imprint that they're trying to put into our minds. So we have this patient here that they're starting off with, and he's got some issues, to say the very least. This guy's got some issues. And when push comes to shove, yeah, he's a bit nuts, to say the very least. He's a bit nuts. He's a little loco en la cabeza. And this doctor who used to work with Mark Spector, very specifically, she goes around and does this big, long search and tries to figure out what, she could do to help this guy. The problem is she is on a terrible slant, in so much that the idea is that she is herself a little nuts. She is almost criminally obsessed with Moon Knight. She dreams about him all the time. She keeps a wardrobe closet like right next to her bed, not even hidden, apparently, with a cloak and a bunch of pictures and paper clippings. What do you have? A big picture of Mark, back from his army days, and a big red circle around his face, and just, she's got a very unhealthy obsession. So she's got issues, big time issues. It's funny because if you read the comic just on the surface, you think that everybody else has the problem. It's actually her. She's the one who has the problem, and she creates this bad guy, this guy who was in the army also, who was, it's funny, some of the things that are said, it's like, is this coming from a British aspect? Like, are they actually in Britain or something? What's going on? It's just the language that's used, so it's indicating that they do have a plethora of different characters from all over. Anyway, reading into this a little bit, you realize that she is a little nuts. She's dealing with this guy who was abused in the army. Now, hazing rituals go only but so far. All right? They're supposed to go only but so far, but they can get really torturous. They can get really bad. It's a really ridiculous way to adapt to a messed up situation. These guys stripped this guy naked. Okay, this unnamed guy. There's no name for this guy. He's just a patient right now. Transferred out of the Army Psychological Institute because it turns out that he actually forged documents to get in. So they don't know what his actual name is, and we'll eventually find out what his fake name was. Anyway, he's brought in, and they stripped this guy naked, and he apparently killed all these guys because with a fire somehow. So you start trying to piece things together, and then they change it all because some insane patient comes along and says, I was over there when this happened. And I wanted to ask you something. Do you really think that this guy who was naked and tied up in the middle of, all these other guys, do you think that he could have started that fire? So it's like, wait a second, what's going on here? Was there somebody else involved? And then you realize that he can start fires all by himself, coming from his eyes. Maybe he's got mutant powers, and he can set himself on fire, and he's perfectly fine. But at the same time, he's got hands that are burnt from fire. So how could his whole body burn but not himself? Maybe some kind of a latent mutant ability that's causing this. At the same time, the only person who actually saw the fire coming out of his eyes is the doctor herself, who introduced him to the idea of Amon-Ra, who is the father of Khonshu. Yeah, this is, she's already got issues. She's already got massive issues, and she survives this fire. She's got, her right eye is burned out. Her skin is gone. If you've seen the new Shadow comic book that's out over in Dynamite Comics, it looks a little bit like that, but actually a little bit worse for wear, go figure. Anyway, this is a really messed up situation. And I am so in love with the psychological dystopia that is this comic book. You can't tell if this guy's a mutant or if she's just crazy. Just like when Warren Ellis wrote for Moon Knight, you couldn't tell if he actually had magical powers or if he was gifted by Khonshu or if it was all just psychosis. This isn't retcons showing these different things for Moon Knight. No, this is Warren Ellis showing, hey, look how crazy this guy is. And now over here, Max Bemis is doing a very similar job with this new character. So we finally got, as was advertised in press releases, we finally got an actual arch nemesis for Moon Knight. Which is, I know we've had some before. We've had like Bushmaster and things like that. And you could almost say Werewolf by Night, but, they became friends really quickly, if that's what you want to call Jack Russell. Oh, make sure you check out both Moon Knight Explained in a Minute and Werewolf by Night Explained in a Minute on Comic Book University. Guys, this is really impressive. I love the hell out of this comic book. I'm going to actually give this, besides an A+, I'm going to give this my Amazeballs pick of the week. I was so impressed with this comic book. So impressed. This is what comics are supposed to be made of. In my opinion, this is what these comics are supposed to be made of. And, of course, seeing what was written at the end by both Jason and Max, that fills my heart with joy. Plus, Max is a Philadelphia boy. I'm a Jersey boy, so we're like, we're paisans, Anyway, this comic, this is great. I love the dedication that he says this is the ultimate expression of what he wants to do in comics. Fantastic. And realistically, why should anyone else be allowed to write for any character unless that's the character they've always wanted to write for? And they really push for that. I know a lot of people are bringing to mind Dan Slott right now. Sorry, I think there are more people who like Dan Slott than who dislike Dan Slott. The people who dislike him are just louder. So loud. Anyway, so that's it. I really enjoyed this comic, obviously. All right, guys, Professor Bell, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.